Today we've got a big topic. We're going to be talking about big questions and a big answer. And Christmas time really surrounds questions, doesn't it? For kids, they want to know what they're going to get. Does Santa know what it's going to be? And actually, when I was a kid, I had one real genuine question, and that was, am I actually going to get coal this year? Because if Santa knew if I'd been bad or good, then I was in serious trouble on Christmas. That was funny. That's your only joke for the day, actually. I know jokes are less funny if you call them jokes. You can get them laughed at. Kevin could tell you that. So, for adults, though, they have different questions. They want to know, is the whole family going to get around the Christmas table this year? What might Christmas be like without a particular loved one? Or is this going to be the last Christmas with a particular loved one? Can it really be Christmas in this situation? And these big questions are really only going to get us started on the questions that we have to deal with today. And what we're going to be looking at is the wise men, people with big questions. So if you want to turn with me to read the scripture that we all know well, we're going to try to do it with fresh eyes today. And that'll be Matthew 2, 1 to 12. After Jesus was born in Bethlehem in Judea, during the time of King Herod, Magi from the east came to Jerusalem and asked, "Where is the one who's been born King of the Jews? We saw his star when it rose, and we have come to worship him." When King Herod heard this, he was disturbed, and all of Jerusalem with him. When he had called together all the people's chief priests and the teachers of the law, he asked them where the Messiah was to be born. "In Bethlehem in Judea," they replied, "for this is what the prophet has written. But you, Bethlehem, in the land of Judah, are by no means least among the rulers of Judah, for out of you will come a ruler who will shepherd my people Israel." Then Herod called the Magi secretly and found them out to tell them the exact time the star had appeared. He sent them to Bethlehem and said, "Go and search carefully for the child. As soon as you find him, report to me, so that I may too go and worship him." After they had heard the king, they went on their way. And the star they had seen when it rose went ahead of them until it stopped at the place where the child was. When they saw the star, they were overjoyed. On coming to the house, they saw the child with his mother Mary, and they bowed down and they worshipped him. Then they opened their treasures, and they presented him with gifts of gold, frankincense, and myrrh. And having been warned in a dream not to go back to Herod, they returned to their country by another route. Well, there is certainly some big questions for the wise men, and we'll get into that. First, I want to tell you a little story. This is one of my favorite stories of big questions, not because it's a happy story, but just because it's a great story of someone with a question. So many of you would know Larry King, the great interviewer, TV personality. So Larry, upon finishing his classic program, was interviewed, actually, and he was asked some questions. And the big question they asked Larry was, if you could interview anyone, who would you interview? And he said, well, I'd interview God. And this is this nationally televised live program. And then the interviewer said, well, what would you ask God? And Larry said quite simply, did you have a son? Because for Larry, he was a Jewish man. And this is what his whole life came down to, was this one big question. All his money, all his resources, all his time and beliefs, what he had built his main personality and main life on, was this. Is this what I'm going to put my faith into? Well, like Larry, our culture reveals that we don't really know the question either. We don't know the question or the answer to this big question. And what I want to describe to you today is something that you'll know and something that you'll be quite familiar with. And this is an idea that I've had about buckets. Okay? So just picture with me buckets. We got a whole bunch of them. The first, we could maybe say, is the sex bucket, okay? Let's start pushing some buttons. We've got the sex bucket over here. And somebody thinks, somewhere in here is the answer to my problems, my questions, my concerns, and my issues with life. Somewhere in this bucket, I will find the answer to everything. It'll bring me satisfaction. And they search and they search, and they get to the bottom of the bucket, and there is no answer. Or the money bucket. It's quite common. If I get enough money, if I keep looking, there the answer will be. Or the family bucket, or the substance bucket. Well, I want to say the first character in our story is Herod, who we want to look at today. And I want to say Herod did not have the answer. He had his own buckets. Now, as we think about things with fresh eyes, I must admit to you that I'm a history buff. I like history, okay? So many of you may not know that much about Herod, but we're going to talk about Herod. So tune in. You may thought, I don't need to learn history anymore. Got that credit. Done. But we're going to learn a little bit today. So Herod was an interesting figure in history. So when Julius Caesar was assassinated, that's a name I hope you know, Julius Caesar, when he was assassinated, there was a couple alliances that were born to kind of claim his empire. The first was the rightful heir to his throne, which was Octavian. That was his grandnephew, okay? Octavian. The next was Mark Antony and Cleopatra, okay? Those are other names we probably know. So they started going to war, and Mark Antony and Cleopatra actually aligned with Herod, more like Herod aligned with them. And the war was going well. They were winning. Things were going well. And then some really intense battles kind of steered them in the wrong direction. And Herod was looking to get out of a job. He was probably stressed. And actually, this all culminated in one road. Herod was walking on with his army, and up comes Octavian with his army. And Octavian kind of encounters Herod, and he goes, why am I not going to kill you right now, this second, on this road? And Herod goes, well, I never really actually liked Cleopatra and Mark Antony anyway. I want to be on your team. I've always wanted to be on your team, but I was just kind of in too far with them. Can I be on your team, please? And Octavian said, well, you know what? This guy, he's committed, He's swearing that he'll be on my side. That's okay. Okay, you're on my team. And together, Herod and Octavian defeated Cleopatra and Mark Antony. Octavian was then named the Emperor Augustan, or in our story, the Caesar Augustus. And Herod inherited a lot of the land that Cleopatra and Mark Antony would have had or had under their control at the time. And Herod became a very important figure. In fact, he was in charge of all of Judea, capital city Jerusalem. He was in a good spot. Well, this little history lesson, and what we know about Herod from our story and from the Bible as well, he built a temple, and he's a little stressed out about this new king of the Jews. And it's funny because he was named by Octavian as King of the Jews. So you could see it would stress him out a little bit when somebody is coming to town saying, where's the new King of the Jews? Well, here's what we learn and how we know that he doesn't have the answer is because Herod had his own buckets. The first bucket is that he valued selfish ambition and power above everything else. We know that Herod did some pretty nasty things. He killed his own sons, killed the chief priest, killed his wife. He built great buildings in his honor. He was willing to align with someone that he had vowed to kill in an alliance system. He did just about everything he could to gain his own spot, his own selfish spot. That's what he cared most about. Anyway, in our story, this actually gets to a pretty nasty point, and that's that when people do come and say, where's the new king of the Jews? We're looking for the king of the Jews. And Herod's going, yeah, me, that's me, I'm that guy. And then they go, no, you're not that guy, you're crazy. Where's the real one? He actually kills all the babies in the surrounding area under the age of 2. That's how willing he was going to go to keep his power. And he was an old man at the time. So he valued his own selfish pursuits and power above all. The next is he valued people's opinions. See, Herod was not Jewish. He was an Edomite, which would mean that he was a descendant of Esau. So he was not under the realm of Jewish honor and privilege, but he wanted to be. And actually, he aligned himself with, I'm sure I have it written down. He aligned himself with the Hasmonean family. These would have been from the Maccabean period, the Hasmonean family. He married into this, hoping to kind of get some Jewish credit. I want to be liked by these Jewish people. And his whole story is this kind of story of wanting to be liked by these people, but they never really like him. He builds a great temple, trying to outdo Solomon in honor of Yahweh for the Jewish people, and they still don't like him that much. In fact, he kills people and stops rebellions just to try to keep people along his side, but it never really works. Although he cared so much about the Jewish people and was called the King of the Jews, they never really liked him that much. Well, I'm sure none of you are in the mood to be compared to Herod this morning, and that's not what I want to do. But I do want to say that Herod's Buckets, a bucket of selfish ambition and a bucket of personal opinion, where people think of him and how they think of him, are things we can probably resonate with, even though we wouldn't go to the same tyrannical degree that Herod did. We can kind of get it. We can kind of get that he was searching for an answer in questions, but these questions did not bring him to the right point. Well, on the other hand, we do have some different people. We have these wise men, and the wise men were also men of prestige and power, rich men, men that people would have known about and valued, and we call them three kings in some songs, whether that's the best translation or not. These are certainly wealthy, well-to-do, honored people, and they respond in the complete opposite way that Herod does. Well, interestingly enough, their bucket gets them to the place. They go on a great journey. All they're staring up at the stars, and we call them Magi because they were likely astrologers, and we get our word magic from Magi, but it's not best to understand that they're magicians or some sort of supernatural people like that. They are more looking in the stars and looking at tangible things to find answers. And all their answers point them in one direction. Everything points them one way, and that's to Jesus. That's to one little baby in a manger. God with us, Emmanuel. And I know that they get it for a couple reasons. I know that they get the answer for 3 reasons. Now, a lot of us could say we get the answer, you know. We know Jesus is the answer. Jesus is the answer to our problems. Jesus is it. But the wise men actually reveal that they have the answer to the question because they respond in the right way. And you show that you have the answer when you respond to the question correctly. Right, David? Yeah, that's right. He's a teacher. So, first thing they do is they tell people about it. This is how they reveal that they get the answer, that they're on to the thing that Jesus means. They tell people about it. The wise men come in and they tell Herod about this new Savior, this new Messiah. Where's the person that's been born King of the Jews? We're looking for him. And we hear that all of Jerusalem is stirring with this information. Now, we're going to move into the extra biblical, and we're not going to call this heresy, but just like use your imaginations with me, okay? So I'm using my imagination, and I'm picturing these cool wise men who are all decked out, and they've got, cavalry, and they're these awesome, great, rich figures, and they're moving into Jerusalem, and there's people like, what are these guys doing here? All the way from Persia or this faraway land, whatever it was. And they're like, we're here to find the new King of the Jews. You can imagine why Jerusalem was stirring. You can imagine why people were talking. And I'm sure the wise men could not keep it in. You guys didn't know? You didn't know why we're here? You haven't figured this out yet? You've been looking at these same scriptures for thousands of years, and you haven't figured out that the Messiah is coming now? He's here. He's coming. I want to tell you today, as we consider telling people about the story, about the answer, about the Savior, I want to say we have a couple things in our back pocket that are useful, a couple things that are good. And that would be, I would say people don't want to talk about God because they think it isn't important. I don't think people want to talk about God because they know it's important. Everyone wants to know what's going on. People are thinking about where they were before and where they're going to go after. So even though it seems that people don't want to have anything to do with God, they might be a little bit more interested than you think. The next thing is that in a maze of life and in a world of buckets, none with the answer, there's one. And you have the answer. And people do need to know. The next thing is they give a lot to Jesus. They give a lot to Jesus. In response to the question and in revealing the answer, the wise men reveal that they give a lot to Jesus. See, the first thing is in the journey, if we can use the word, is they go off on this journey and it's not really the safest one, okay? They are going on a path that is going to be long, treacherous. There's going to be robbers and bandits. They could die. They're carrying like gold with them, and these are rich men. And they're traveling across the world at the time. This is risky business. And it's in this journey that they reveal one of the great things to us. And that's that, you know what? Yeah, the journey's scary. Yeah, they could have sat home, known the answer. Great, we're in it, cool. Or they could have taken off, all for Jesus. And the thing is, that path is the only one that gets them to Jesus. The risky one, the scary one, the one with trials, the one with hard people. And although you might not have robbers or bandits in your path today, you are faced with the same journey. One that arrives at Jesus, the only one that arrives at Jesus. Finally, and most revealing to me, is they worship Jesus. They worship Jesus. And when I think about this one, I really think, when we think about the wise men, the Magi, or the three kings, or yada yada, we think they went to give presents to Jesus. That's the reason they went, right? That's why. It's to give their three great presents. And we could talk about, this is what frankincense means and myrrh, and we're on a new path of fresh eyes, and we're not going to do that. But interestingly enough, they worship him. They worship him. And that's the reason they go. When Herod says, "What are you guys doing here? Why are you here?" They said, "We've come to worship the king. We've come to worship. We've come to worship." The journey, the path, the adventure, the stars, it all points to the worshiping of Jesus. That's the reason they come. Well, as I considered this, I want to present to you one of my interesting theological thoughts on the matter, and I read different things as I prepared, and this would be one of those at-the-door conversations where you go, I don't know about that part. But here's my thought, and I'll just share it with you, is interestingly enough, these men, the Magi, are coming from a distant land, Persia, wherever the scholars have pointed us, but chances are they're not Jewish. Interesting that these people that are Gentiles are now included in the story right off the bat with a new little baby. And even more interesting is that these Gentiles are deciding to worship the baby. The thing that's interesting about this is that worshiping was for gods, right? You could bring honor to Herod or Caesar, but you didn't worship them. You worshiped a god. So in the midst of everything going on, we've got wise men that are outsiders, not included in the promise and all this stuff up to this point, and they have clued into something crazy, and that's that their job is to worship this baby. Because this baby is something more than a human, something more than what's been around lately, something special, something incredible, something they've never seen before. And this is the true answer. The fact that outsiders, magicians from a faraway land, are now included in the salvation story. It's unbelievable. It's unbelievable. And that's the answer for all of us today. You can be magicians from a faraway land, Jews, Gentiles, whatever background you think you might come from, and I'm not good enough. And Jesus is saying, no. You're all in to my story. You can all be included. It's quite something, really. Anyway, if we go back to using our imaginations, I can picture the look on Mary and Joseph's face when these kings come in and they bow down before their new baby. It's crazy. And that's what it's about. Worship. Worship and bringing honor and glory to this king who is do-it-all. Well, today, as we finish up, I want to say Christmas is hard. It's a happy time of year, but it brings up some tough things and brings up tough questions. And I know today that, like me, you have questions on your mind. There's things that are tough in your situations. I'm not going to say that this is all great for all of us today, and you're all sitting here happy or feeling joy. And there's big questions. Why don't I feel loved? What if my bucket doesn't have the answer? What about my family? What about my job? What about my debt? What about my illness? What about these things going on in our lives? Well, I could easily get up in front of you today and say, Jesus is the answer. Jesus is the answer to all these things. And I will say that, he is. But that doesn't give you much to go on if you're sitting there saying, yeah, how's he the answer to my cancer? How is he the answer to my debt? How is he the answer to my divorce? I don't see him in that. Well, I can't stand up here as a pastoral presence that gives you one-on-one counseling from the pulpit today and say, well, you might find that Jesus does care about your debt or your divorce or your family struggles or your illness, whatever those things might be. What I can say to you today is if you look your eyes upon Jesus and you look full in his wonderful face, the things of earth grow strangely dim in the light of his glory and grace. And that's the real answer. He does care. And in view of forever, in view of heaven, salvation, and grace, well, the temporary things of earth do grow a bit dimmer. I don't want to discount your problems today, but I want to tell you Jesus cares, and he's in the situation. And he brought salvation for eternity for you today, so that these temporary things will sting a little less. Well, I'll probably end almost every sermon with what will you do about it? And I think we're in two camps today. First of all, I want to say to the people out here in the audience, I don't know who you are, the people that haven't made decisions, the people that are saying, you know what, I've got different buckets and Jesus isn't one of them. I've been looking in all the wrong places. I want to say, the invitation is open. He came for you. He would have come if you were the only one. He loves you so much to bring you salvation, eternal salvation, to get you out of your buckets, to make you say, I don't need any of these anymore. I'm here for you. For the people today that have made that decision, I want you to say, reveal that you know the answer through the same way the wise men did. Tell people about it. There's nothing better you could do this Christmas than to tell somebody who's lost in a maze the way out. Or give to Jesus. Give your life. Say, I'm not going to sit home on a journey that doesn't lead me to Jesus. I'm going to take the risky one. I'm going to take the one that's harder. But I'm going to take the one that leads to him. The only one that leads to him. And then finally, I want to say, worship him. You know, it's quite something to imagine wise men on this terrific journey, an incredible adventure, arriving finally in front of the actual baby and getting down on their hands and knees and their faces, saying, this is it. Can you imagine we're here and Jesus is there? And you might think today that you don't have that opportunity, that you can't come right into the direct presence of God and say, you're it, you're awesome, you're amazing. But you can. You can. You can worship him with everything you have today. And that's what it's about, is worshiping God. Worshiping God. So when you sing the songs on Sunday mornings or you listen to the Christmas music, I want you to think about the words you're saying. And I want you to give him the worship that he's due. Really sing about it. Don't just carry the tune, but actually worship, knowing that you are in the presence of God.